justice for all.
Thank you, Matt. So Chairman Trask is at home on Zoom tonight. I'm the acting chair facilitating this meeting, Daniel Bennett, and we'll take all votes by roll call. So for attendance, Maureen Bernard,
Here.
Matt Duggan,
Here.
David Mills,
Yes.
Gardner Trask. Gardner, can you raise your hand? Thank you, you're here?
Here.
And
Can you
Dan
hear me?
Bennett, thank you. We're all here tonight, thank you. Can we have an approval of the minutes of August 17th, 2021?
Mr. Chair, I'll make approval of the minutes of August 17th, 2021.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Hearing none, we'll take a roll call vote. David,
Yes.
Matt,
Yes.
Maureen,
Yes.
Gardner on the minutes.
Yes.
And I will abstain, I was not there. Thank you. At this time, if anybody has any new public business that's not on the agenda, now's your time to speak. And I see Mr. Bradstreet with his hand daintily up. Please.
Can I take this off for a minute? Or do I have to leave it on?
Leave it on, please.
Okay. Two things. First one is, Danvers has a water issue, or has in the past. There've been a couple of articles in the paper. One was in April in the USA that there were 10 endangered rivers in the United States. The Ipswich River was number 8. On the 28th of June, we went into a water level restrictions. And then in July, the Salem News mentioning climate change and the water restrictions or lack of that are in this area. There's a water restriction in Ipswich with a population of 14,000 plus or minus. Danvers with a population of 24,000 plus or minus. However, Beverly with a population of 42,000 plus or minus, there's no restriction. And Salem with a population of 44,000 plus or minus, there's no restriction. My question is, can we as a community employ the talk to the people who we elect to represent us in Boston? Can we ask them to try to do something to mitigate this problem? Why do we suffer restrictions when larger communities don't? Is there something we can do, I guess?
Well, Bill, it's a very good question, and the town manager, the town staff have been wrestling with this issue about our water permit to withdraw from the Ipswich River, and the restrictions we have, the penalties we have that don't seem fair. There's ongoing conversations. There's, obviously Beverly Salem has their reservoir and they have, they take all the water they want, unfortunately. I could ask the town manager to update us at some point in time on where we are on the water issue. Thank goodness this year, nobody likes it, but we had a lot of rain.
But we can't store the extra
We
rain.
can't, that's our biggest problem.
Yes.
No storage capability. If we could solve that problem, we'd be well on our way to having more water.
I mentioned divine intervention, I think, in the past, but I guess that's not going to happen. But I would appreciate an update on how or what is happening to the
Sure,
town.
but the manager can update the board and the public at some point in the future on where we're at on the water issue. Is that all right, Steve?
Absolutely. Yep.
Thank you. Thank you, Bill, for the
You're
question.
working on it.
Always working on it, Bill.
Thank you. The other one, I have to apologize. I wasn't here for the August 17th Selectmen's meeting. Number 12 on that agenda was the board will hear from the staff about the customer cost of service charges. Obviously, it was discussed. My one bill, I have a $7.50 charge, and one, I think the water sewer, I have a $17 charge. Is it possible that the town is putting together some kind of a missive to send out with our bills that explains to us why this billing took place, how they arrived at the dollar fee. And I think I heard indirectly that possibly even these rates are going to change and go up, which doesn't make me happy, and I don't think it would make the other residents of the town happy to hear that. I know nothing goes back, it always goes up. It's just that if we had some more knowledge about what was going
Right.
on.
And Bill, I also was not at that meeting. I was disappointed, but I did watch the replay. I, in fact, had requested the town manager to have the light board come before us to tell us what's going on, because they did just, I'm not saying rightly or wrongly, institute that surcharge to all the bills without any transparency.
There you go.
And I think what I heard from the chairman of the water board is that there will be transparency in the future, but there's no promise not to raise it again. Is that correct, Mr. Town Manager?
That's correct. We had Bill Hayes is the chair of the light board. He was here with Clint Allen, our assistant utility director, and David Lane, and they did talk about the process. I will say it was a transparent process, but it played out at the light board, which is not our most heavily attended meeting. So part of the discussion was, as they continue to look at this, to make sure that we're using platforms like this meeting and press releases to get the word out that the discussion is taking place.
Or even a form letter in the bills that we all receive monthly or tri-monthly, as far as the water and sewer, would be a big help.
Yep. I would say, short of watching the meeting from last period, you're always welcome to reach out to Clint Allen, and he would be happy to spend as much time as you'd like talking about cost of service, Bill.
Oh, I bet he'd love to talk to me. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other new public business? Hearing none, we'll move right on to item number 3. A public hearing will be held on the application of AMP Hospitality, LLC, DBA, my glasses are fogging up, Rebel Coffee and Creamery, Maple Street, Andrew Mahoney, Manny Drenard, Peter Capilillo, owners, for the transfer of a common vicular's license at that location, formerly Esposito's Bakery. Is there somebody here to speak to this?
Yes, sir.
Please step to the microphone, introduce yourself, tell us what you want to do.
Good evening. Thank you. My name is Peter Capalvo. I'm here with my two partners, Andy Mahoney and Manny Gennard. And we are going to open Rebel Coffee and Creamery, where the Esposito's Bakery was, or still is, on Maple Street. Basically, maneuver in the same direction with fine coffees and continue with a much lighter baking schedule. No more cakes and cupcakes, but more croissants and homemade scones, sandwiches, light breakfast, light lunch.
Hours of operation?
7 days a week, 7 to 10 right now, with a lighter schedule to open up probably around 7 to 3.
Okay, we'll start with questions from Select Person Maureen.
Hi, what are you going to serve there? Is it specialty coffees?
Yes, we'll have more of a barista situation with an espresso machine and pour over coffees, and a more selective brewed coffee for drip and cuts by the cup. And we'll be doing a lot of baking in the back as far as croissants, scones, fresh pastries. We plan on making some different breakfast sandwiches and rolling those homemade breads into lunch in the same way.
And what, have you done this before? in another
Very
before?
much, yep.
And-
I've been in
yeah.
the business for 40 years.
In the order, and I don't have any other questions. Thank you.
Matt?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So as I mentioned to you guys earlier, it's great to see a small business moving into the square. Can you just describe a little bit about the actual layout of the store? I assume it's not just going to be takeout, right? Customers will be able to sit at tables inside?
I don't know if we're having tables as a regular cafe would have. The main tables would be outside, but the design of the interior will have seats right at the window and a more smaller countertop. The bulk of the business will be takeout.
Okay. And for a question through you, Mr. Chairman, would outdoor seating at this establishment, that would require additional paperwork?
It would.
Yeah, okay, just, all right.
I thought there was already outdoor seating. And the only reason why we weren't doing any tables was just based on COVID. Down the line, we may be-
Could you go to the microphone,
Yeah, I
please?
apologize.
We had, there's outside seating there already. We were going to do some stools in the window. We weren't going to overly saturate the seating based on what has been going on for the last year and a half.
Right.
So if that is to change down the line, then we'd love to have some inside seating, but right now, we don't think it's the safest.
Okay, that's fine. It just seems more inviting for your type of,
We want that, but
Yeah.
the way things are now, we're trying to future-proof ourselves from taking a hit.
I understand. Okay.
yeah.
Well, I wish you success. Thank you. That's all I have, Mr.
So, Town
Chairman.
Clerk, is there a diagram of any proposed seating for this establishment?
Not attached to this application.
It could be as an older than new, and it's stamped.
So that's not going to be acceptable for the clerk to put in her records. She'd need a copy, and we'd need to see a copy of it too, to digest it.
No, I thought you just had asked, and I was just gonna show you that.
We'll need a copy for the clerk's record for any seating arrangements, proposed or otherwise.
So, in the past, there was a few tables. With just it's the same seating, we haven't changed anything. We're not adding or taking away. So right now, the way that the layout sits, where
Go to the microphone, please.
The way that the Esposito's now currently sits, we're not really changing essentially anything outside of some food menus and a couple items. If there's a little grab-and-go drink here, might be moved over there, but for the most part, nothing's changing.
So the building inspector would require a plan so that he can check on, in the future, any inspections as to what's supposed to be there.
Correct.
Okay, the clerk needs a copy for her records. And I don't know if the Board of Health needs one, but
All of that's in order, in process.
it's all in process.
Yes,
Oh, yeah.
The building inspector has been notified, and he's working with the applicant.
But he hasn't signed off on it yet.
Not that I'm aware of, but
No, and we also were working with the health department and the sanitarian department as well.
We'll continue questions. David,
Nothing, thank you, Mr. Chairman, good luck.
any other questions? This is a public hearing. Anyone in the public with a question? Hearing none, what's the will of the board?
Mr. Chairman,
Yes?
I move we accept the application as presented.
Can we
with the
close the
condition
public
that the
hearing
other-
first, please?
Oh, I'm sorry, I move we close public hearing.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay. Maureen?
Yes.
David? Matt?
Yes.
Gardner?
Yes,
Public hearing is closed. Is there a motion?
I'll make a motion to close.
Mr.
public
Chairman, I
hearing.
move we,
Done.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
I move we accept the application as presented with the completion of the paperwork to the clerk.
Is there a second?
Second.
Discussion? We have a motion. David?
Yes.
Matt?
Yes.
Maureen?
Yes.
Gardner?
Yes,
And Dan votes no. There's no proper paperwork. It should have been submitted, in my opinion, ahead of time, and it should have been signed off by the building inspector before it came this far. It passes 4-1. Good luck.
Thank you very much.
The board is in receipt of 3 applications from Essex North Shore Agricultural Technical School, 565 Maple Street. Bonnie Carr, Director of Workforce Development, for one-day wine and malt licenses for the following events: Saturday, October 16th, 6 to 10, Larkin Gala. Thursday, November 18th, 6 to 8, Adult Ed Community Enrichment Class. And Thursday, April 14th, 6 to 8 p.m., Adult Ed Community Enrichment Class. Is Bonnie here to speak to that? I assume you're Bonnie.
Hi, thank you for having me in tonight.
And you are Bonnie?
I am Bonnie Carr.
Thank you. So to kind of explain what these events are?
Sure. So the event that we have coming up on August 16th is a Larkin Cottage fundraising homecoming gala. Essex Tech has been in the process of rebuilding the Catherine Larkin Memorial Cottage over the course of the past 2 years in collaboration with outside organizations and our own students. So this is an event that has the purpose of raising money to continue with the building of that multi-use facility cottage. It is an event that will be held under a tent on the South Campus in front of Smith Hall from 6 to 10. And the students and teachers in our culinary department will be providing the food for that event. And we will have a silent auction, a live auction, and music. We will also be presenting the Larkin Lifetime Achievement Award for 2021.
Okay, continue with the other events.
So we also have, as part of our school at Essex Tech, we have our Nighthawks adult education programs. These are two-tiered programs. Some of them are industry trade-related training programs with a job-based outcome. Some of them are community enrichment programs, and those two would include these two events. One of them would be held in the Essex Tech Farm Stand, which is on the right side of the campus on 62. That is on November 18th, and that is a harvest beer tasting and an opportunity for people who attend that to learn about different kinds of craft beers that North Shore craft beer breweries brew. We will have somebody from possibly one of the breweries, like we did before, come and give an overview of the differences in the kind of beers. I might have jumped ahead. I'm sorry. We have one that is a holiday wine tasting as well. And we usually collaborate with that on Total Wines and More. They have somebody come in and explain to people different pairings for different wines in anticipation of the holiday season. And that is for November 18th. The beer one would be for April 14th.
Of 2022?
Of 2022, yeah. And there is food that is prepared for pairings with both of these events by our culinary students as well. They do not serve the food. It is brought to the farm stand, and it's just served in as paired with the alcohol.
Okay. Clerk, is everything in order?
Yes.
Is it unusual to get an application so far out, like in April 2022?
Not usually. I mean, I think she was just trying to get everything in order, where she had to get sign-offs from the various departments and compile her liquor insurance. Not that unusual.
Okay. Would you like us to take one vote on all three or separate votes?
Either way is fine for me. You could take one vote, and then if...
We'll see what the board decides to
sure.
do. Thank you. Questions, David?
No questions, oh, yes, I do. Thank you, Dan. Bonnie, if you know, I have a lot of friends in my age group. We used to love to go to lunch up in the dining room, prepared and served by the students. Do you see that happening in the future? This has nothing to do with your applications, by the way.
Yeah, we absolutely do see it happening. As we are following with the rest of the public schools in the state what the COVID guidance protocols are. And towards the end of the school year last year, we were able to have the culinary students have their parents in just so that they could practice serving and preparing the food for family members. But this year, our goal is to get back open to the public for bakery items to be picked up at the school, as well as being able to come in and make a reservation for lunch or even host a meeting there.
Thanks, Bonnie, because really look forward to that and missed it last year, of course.
Well, we all missed it, but we'll be happy to have you all back this year.
Thank you.
Thank you. Matt?
Oh, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Can you just expand a little bit on the Larkin Cottage? I know that's been an ongoing effort for several years. Can you just describe the current status of that project?
Sure. So the majority of the foundation has been finished, and we're starting to move on to the next phase. During the end of the last school year, we were fortunate to be able to partner with the local 22 laborers union, and they had a partner, SF Concrete, that came and poured the concrete with our students. We have a construction craft labor program that is in partnership with the local 22. So we had to have had at least 40 students with the local that day between our masonry department and our CCL department working directly with the laborers union. So we have some incredible pictures of that day, and it's well on its way. So we're starting to move into the next phase now of that.
All right. That's great that you're making progress. I'm sure the pandemic kind of slowed down the effort.
It did slow it down a little bit.
Can you just describe for the audience who Catherine Larkin was?
Sure. So Catherine Larkin was a graduate of the Essex Aggie homecoming school back in the early years. She left there and became a nurse. And sadly, in World War II, her plane was shot down. She has won and was awarded multiple credentials because of her efforts as a nurse and medals, military medals. Her family is always involved in this event, and Catherine Larkin was from Salem. So we did want to keep her memory alive in having this cottage continue to be named after her moving forward. And aside from just the fundraising efforts itself of the gala, the continual awareness about Catherine Larkin and who she was, and the hope that this new cottage will benefit so many people, and her family is very happy to be a part of that.
Right. And kudos to the school for kind of saving the cottage, because it was in quite disrepair. And I think it was one of the oldest structures on the campus.
Yes, it was. We actually took some historical pieces out of it, and we're using as much wood that was in the original cottage as we can moving forward with the new cottage.
All right, that's great. So, so Ms. Carr has been before this board previously for these types of events, including the Larkin Gala. So I support all three of these applications. That's all I have.
Thank you, Matt. Maureen?
Hi, Bonnie. Thank you for coming before us. I think Bonnie and Heidi and her team do a fabulous job. The Larkin building has been going on for some time. I drive by it. I see the construction. I love the fact that the school hires the kids, or has the kids, and have teamed up with, you said, the local unions to help build this Larkin cottage. I think it's wonderful. I love the adult ed. I think that's fabulous because, as we all know, there needs to be more schools like this, I think. And I'm totally for this, all three of them, and you get my support.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Usually it's shut. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Maureen.
No, I was just saying that, you know, Bonnie and Heidi and the team do a great job, and I think we should, I'm in favor of all three of these events hosted by them, and I might even attend. Thank you.
Gardner?
Thank you. So I have a question. Who is going to do the service? Are they tip certified, and how do you control the alcohol service?
So we partner on all three of these events with bartenders of the North Shore. They're actually the bartending service for the Topsfield Fair as well. All of the servers are tip certified, and those documents have already been presented to the board, as well as a letter from North Shore bartenders and their certificate of liability insurance.
All right, that's my only question. I realize I'm at home and can't be there in person, but I'll wear my mask in solidarity with the rest of the board members. So thank you for answering my questions. That's all I have.
Thank you. What's the will of the board?
I make a motion, Chairman, to accept the what is it, the one-day wine and malt licenses for the following events: Saturday, October 16th, 6 to 10, Larkin Gala; Thursday, November 18th, 6 to 8 p.m., Adult Ed, Community Enrichment Class; and Thursday, April 14th, 2022, 6 to 8 p.m., Adult Ed, Community Enrichment Class.
Is there a second?
Second.
David, thank you. Discussion? Hearing none, we'll go to a roll call. Gardner?
Yes.
David?
Yes.
Matt?
Yes.
Maureen?
Yes.
And Dan, yes as well. Thank you for coming before us and asking for these three licenses. We wish you good luck and continued good efforts on the Larkin Cottage. Both Selectman Mills and I were former trustees at the Aggie way back when, and that Larkin Cottage was always a focal point to try to save. And the good thing is when they merged, they didn't tear it down. So we look forward to that new building coming.
Thank you. We
Online
appreciate your
soon.
support.
You're welcome. Good luck.
Thank you.
If there's no objections from the board or the chief, I'd like to take number 6 next, and the board will hear an update from the police chief, James Lovell, on 2 recent conducted liquor compliance checks. Welcome, chief.
Thank you for,
Welcome, Jamie. Is your first time here before us as chief?
officially, yes.
Yes, thank you.
Thanks for moving me forward in the agenda items. So historically, the department has always done alcohol compliance checks once a year. I believe COVID kind of threw us off last year, so this year we want to get back into those compliance checks. So on August 2nd, 2021, a press release was posted on social media advising local businesses that the Danvers Police Department would be doing compliance checks for the next few weeks, and we would be looking for compliance regarding selling and furnishing alcohol to minors. Tuesday, August 10th, members of the Juvenile Division and Detective Division got together and conducted these compliance checks. 2 17-year-old high school students were selected to assist us. Both students provided very clear instructions on what to do. They were advised to enter an establishment. If it was a restaurant or bar, they would sit at the bar and order 1 Bud Light. If it was a store that sold liquor, they would buy a 6-pack of Bud Light at the register. Both were provided cash from the department, and neither had identifications on them. Of the town's 50 licensed establishments, we had 2 violations. The first violation was at Total Wine. One of the teens entered the store and purchased a 6-pack of Bud Light bottles. The teen exited the store, turned over the alcohol and the receipt to the officers who were waiting outside. Officers went inside, identified the cashier, and spoke to the manager. Both were very cooperative with the officers and very apologetic. The second incident was at 5:43 p.m. The same team entered the Endicott Grill on Endicott Street and sat down at the bar and ordered 1 Bud Light. The student was not asked for an identification. She was given, a Bud Light was placed on the bar in front of her. She exited the restaurant, went outside, got the officers. Officers came inside, observed the Bud Light bottle on the bar, spoke to the manager, the employee as well, identified both. Again, both were very apologetic and cooperative with the officers. So those are the only 2 violations we had during our compliance checks.
Okay, any questions, Maureen, for the chief?
No, I think he was pretty thorough, and I think it's great to do that. Keep everybody on top of their toes. I'm all
Matt?
set.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's just disappointing that these establishments seem to not understand that this is kind of a simple thing to do. Just card everybody that comes into their establishment like they do at Fenway Park. So I think there's systemic issues with these 2 establishments, with not specifically the people that we're serving, but the management themselves. So I would support having the managers of record for both establishments appear before the board at a future meeting.
Thank you. David?
No questions. Thank you. I would always, before we conclude, ask if the chief wished to be heard on any recommendation for disposition on these matters.
At this time, I'll hold off until you have the managers in front of you. I would note that this was the first offense, I believe, for both establishments.
Thank you. I'll second, David.
Thank you, Dan.
Gardner?
Yes, I want to take the opportunity to thank the chief and the police department for the compliance checks. It's an important check and balance. And I know we're focusing on the 2 that failed, but we should celebrate the 48 that passed. I realize it's part of their responsibilities and duties, but 4% failure rate isn't a good thing, and I'm supportive of Select Board Member Duggan's suggestion. In the future, we have the managers before us to discuss revocation, suspension, or other actions therein.
Thank you. Chief, would October 5th be acceptable to have you come back? It's our first meeting in October.
Yes, I'm available.
Okay, because the clerk has to send out registered letters and get them back, so I think this would give her the time and for those folks to be made aware of it. So with the idea of an October 5th, can we have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I'll make a motion, to have
So moved.
the managers come in on October 5th
Thank
before
you.
the board.
Okay, there's a second. So any discussion? Hearing none. David,
Yes.
Matt,
Yes.
Maureen?
Yes.
Gardner?
Yes.
And Dan, yes. Okay, so we'll see you and the managers back here on the 5th.
Thank you.
Thank you. Moving right along. We'll go now to an update from staff on the upcoming zoning special town meeting. And Mr. Town Manager, any thoughts or comments before we start?
Nope, David Fields and Aaron Henry from Land Use Community Services are both here tonight to address the board. You received a packet, a thin packet on Friday summarizing what we'll be talking about tonight, and I would simply note, both for yourselves and anyone who's watching, I believe a red line version of what these gentlemen are going to talk about tonight is on the website and can be reviewed if people want to see the specific language changes that are being discussed tonight. And with that, I would turn it over to David and Aaron.
Welcome, David.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair and the board. If you bear with me, I'm attempting to share my screen. We have a short PowerPoint. At the moment, screen sharing is disabled.
David, if you want to dance for a moment, I'll get Ben.
Yeah.
And who's already rushing in to help us.
There he is.
Hey, Ben.
Okay. Okay, all right. Thank you, everyone. Apologies for that. So we're here tonight to talk to you about zoning bylaw updates proposed for this potential upcoming fall town meeting. As you probably are aware, last year's special town meeting in the fall did not occur, so we have 7 or 8 holdover articles from last year, which did not go forward to town meeting. In addition, we have new ones we've added, so I'm pretty much going to focus on mostly the new articles, but I'm happy to take any questions you may have on anything else. So to just run through the outline, we're going to go over the timeline, which is pretty succinct, and I think you already have that, but for the benefit of those at home, we'll talk about the proposed updates, and then I'm welcoming any discussion we may want to have. So the anticipated timeline per Mass General Law is this evening, we're formally handing you the materials, the Select Board. From there, the materials get forwarded to the Planning Board, who will conduct public hearings opening on September 14th. We hope to meet with the Finance Committee the first week of October, between the 4th and the 8th at some point, but we have yet to schedule that, I believe. October 12th, the Planning Board hearings will close. From there, we go through the warrant process. We hope to have a town meeting member workshop in early to mid-November, and then on to town meeting on the 15th of November. So the bylaw changes for this year, not the holdover ones mainly, but for this year are due to either state or case law changes in the statute or things that have come out of the courts. Things we're calling chronic problems or nuisance issues, so stuff we get phone calls about, things board members complain about, things businesses may complain about. We're trying to address some of those this year. And then the final one is technical corrections, board and staff requests, and internal consistencies, a lot of it due to numbering or circular references. On the left-hand side of the screen, you'll see the potential updates from last year's town meeting, which didn't occur. As I said, I'm not really going to focus on those this evening. We went through the whole process last year up to and including reports by the planning board, just didn't get to town meeting. We have 2 general bylaw updates for this fall, one about the preservation bylaw or demolition delay bylaw, and then the second is wetlands protection, which we did update last October, but a few tweaks need to be made based on the Attorney General's returned bylaw. Following that, on the right-hand side are the updates we hope to make for fall of 2021 as it relates to zoning. So the first part of this, and I'll leave it to the discretion of the chair whether we take questions as we go or if they shall be held to the end. But the first thing I wanted to talk about was storage containers and outdoor storage. They fall into the nuisance category and are several things we constantly get phone calls about. The main component for storage containers was updating how residential storage containers are treated. Currently, you can have 2 storage containers on your property pretty much indefinitely. We constantly get phone calls about it, asking when they're going to be moved, how they're going to be moved, can we deal with them? And most of the time, the response is, unfortunately, it's not a zoning violation. Our bylaw allows that. So part of the attempt to address it this year was to change what we're doing. They'll still be fully allowed. They would just only be allowed for 2 months without special permit relief from the Zoning Board of Appeals. So you have your storage container, your pod or your pack rat or whatever it may be for 2 full months to do whatever it is you need to do. Any longer than that would go to the zoning board.
David, would you recommend people ask for the extended time up front, or do you want to give them the 2 months and then have them come in and ask for it?
Ideally, if they know it's going to be more than 2 months, ask for it up front. If you run into a situation, and we've put in a caveat for this, say on a construction job, or if you have a building permit issued, sometimes you may not know, especially now due to lack of materials or lack of labor. We basically said if you have a building permit in good standing and you're working with the building commissioner, you can keep it longer if you need to, but it's pretty much tied to the building permit. We don't want to see it there after that. So we did a carve out for the circumstances we're living in with today and probably will be in the future. But
Thank you.
yep. That was pretty much that. I'll move along unless there's any other questions.
You have a question?
Go ahead, Matt. Yeah, go ahead.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chairman. So just a clarification on what's considered a storage container. So what you show on the slide, those look like they have roofs on them and they're lockable. What about things like dumpsters? Would that be considered a storage container?
Dumpster would not be considered a storage container. We added some performance standards in this section of the bylaw to essentially allow residential storage containers to be the things that I previously mentioned, a U-Haul box, a pod, or a pack rat, where the commercial and industrial storage containers really do look like what you're seeing here. It's pretty much the back of a trailer truck. We wanted to ensure that the commercial and industrial uses were allowed to continue doing their shipping operations or storage, whereas the homeowners, generally, we wanted to tie it to something that would frankly be proper in a residential area. But no, dumpsters would not count.
And did I hear you say like a tractor trailer would be considered a storage container?
It would not for a residential zone. Those would be prohibited.
All right. And I think just in general, storage containers in a residential area would be frowned on, I think, by most residents. And so that today, that's a 60-day limitation, and then it becomes an accessory use?
That's our proposal. Currently, it is not a 60-day limitation.
It's just unlimited? Yeah, okay. All right, that's all I have, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, continue, David.
Okay. So we'll move on to outdoor storage. Currently, our bylaw calls it outdoor storage, display, or sales. The main change here is we wanted to break those different segments out. So for instance, what you see on the screen in front of you is PVC pipe storage. That would be considered going forward outdoor storage, which would differ from the snow blower, which is for display purposes. However, you're not purchasing that exact snow blower. That would be considered outdoor display, followed up by outdoor sales, which is like your plant sale or a hanging basket that you would go ahead and purchase. So right now, most of the common complaints fall into this category are for things that we really can't identify. It's generally a whole jumble of this happening all at the same time, and it's hard to parse what is outdoor storage, what is actually allowed, what is sales, and is that allowed. So going forward, we want to break those things out into 3 separate categories, just to make it easier to work with and work through and to respond to nuisance complaints. And also, we would impose limitations on the size of each of those buckets of things. So you could have a 1,500 square foot outdoor storage space. You would also be able to have a separate display space and a separate sales space, as opposed to just applying for one permit that doesn't really say what it is that you're actually storing or displaying or selling.
How would those PVC pipes be classified?
That's outdoor storage. That's true outdoor storage, meaning the public does not go there to shop. They don't go over there and pick up the pipes. That's just a fork truck comes along every couple days and moves some stuff around.
So you're not putting any restrictions on that?
Correct.
Okay.
You'll still be able to do all 3 of these things by right. It's just breaking them out and separating them so we can, if there is an issue going forward, respond to a complaint.
Okay.
I have a
Yes.
question.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So today, the outdoor storage is a percentage of the total indoor area? Can you just expand on what that means?
Yeah, so today it's a 20% limitation on the floor area that exists inside. Essentially, it means if you have, a 10,000 square foot building, you're allowed 20% of that outside. If you go above that, you'd have to go to the Zoning Board of Appeals for relief of some sort. Frankly, we didn't really think that that was necessarily a good metric either, because you do get, you could have a small hardware store with a very small footprint, extremely limiting their outdoor storage, or you could have a very large facility, which we may not actually want to allow 20% of their floor area. So instead of tying it to a percentage of the floor area of inside the building, we'd rather just limit it to what you can do outside as it relates to the storage itself, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and we saw, I don't know if you want to call it a variance from ZBA, or that allows them to expand that 20% by it's a variance, I believe?
I believe in the 2 cases you're referring to, yes, it was a use variance.
Yeah, on Arch Meadow Drive. So it didn't seem like the 20% was really something that was considered by the applicant right off the bat. They just had a size in mind, and then they just went for that. So I assume that this wouldn't be allowed in residential areas, right?
That's correct.
Okay. But we see, like on Harbor Street, where it's industrial 1, 28 Harbor, but across the street is residential. So is there a way to force this type of site to be screened so the neighbors wouldn't be seeing these items?
Yep, there are performance standards in the bylaw changes screening, especially the outdoor storage. It needs to be screened with either opaque fencing materials or vegetation. We didn't specify what you exactly need to screen it with. We'd rather leave it up to the discretion of the boards, but it does need to be screened.
Right, because it's important for people watching that industrial and residential can be side by side, and it has a detriment oftentimes on the quality of life for the people that are in the residential zone. So whatever we can do to tighten up this language, make it less open to interpretation, and so when applications do come in, we can easily see whether or not they meet the criteria that's defined here. Yeah, that's all I have. Thank you.
All right. I should note, we did present these changes, the vast majority of them, to the Zoning Board of Appeals earlier in the month, just to get some feedback. We're trying to take a consolidated approach. We like to visit with all the boards and commissions we staff and keep everybody in the loop as much as possible. So both of these changes they viewed favorably. The next thing I wanted to discuss, we can pretty much take them as they're 2 separate parts of the zoning bylaw, but more or less one issue, which was dwelling unit conversions and then multifamily allowances in single-family zones. So right now, we specifically allow these 2 flavors of either dwelling unit expansion or unit expansion within an existing building in R1, 2, and 3, our single-family residential zones. And I did a quick analysis just on this map after some thinking about it, and the parts of the map that are in beige are zoning districts R1, 2, and 3. And the parcels in red are the parcels that are not in compliance, meaning they are above single family. So we have roughly about, give or take, and again, it's not an exact count, but give or take 800 additional units in these districts above single family usage. Now, the reason that I point that out is if we were doing a traditional build-out analysis, we would look at the parcels available for a conventional subdivision, go through the numbers, see what parcels are developable, and come up with a number from there. As it stands, even if we did that analysis, whatever number comes out of there, we're already 800 units above that number. And as some of you may know, there's a recent census count that happened, and new numbers will be coming out from DHCD soon. So with that in mind, we were looking towards this map and towards these changes to, hopefully say, these aren't bad dwelling types, these aren't bad projects in any way, shape, or form, but we may want to think about not having them going forward, given that we do have quite a number of them now. So for instance, a three-family or a four-family building's not going to, it's not likely that it would ever revert back to a single family, and that's okay. But we were sort of thinking after this analysis that we have quite a number of them, which is also fine, but perhaps we might want to tighten that up and start limiting the additional new units we have above traditional growth as it is.
What do you mean by tighten up? Not allow it?
The articles as we have them going forward would be to eliminate dwelling conversion and then limit multifamily only where it's allowed in the bylaw and no longer in the residential 1 district, which is where it's allowed today. The recommendation, I will say, from the zoning board coming out of this was to not eliminate dwelling conversions and to continue to have 2-family dwellings allowed in R1, but eliminate multifamily. That's sort of complicated. I can say it again if you need me to.
Say it again.
So it would be to eliminate multifamily, which is anything more than 2 units in R1, but continue to allow 2-unit developments in R1, which is what is also allowed today.
How many multifamilies do you have in R1?
I didn't run those numbers, but it would be all of these plus probably
Quite a
a
few.
significant amount more, yes.
So you're going to prohibit multifamilies in the future in R1?
Just going forward, and this is tied
Well,
to,
you're not going backwards,
correct,
you're going forwards.
right.
You're going to eliminate and not permit multifamilies.
That would be the recommendation, only in that these nonconformities would continue being used, frankly, probably forever, again, which is completely okay, but part of this is tied to our work with the downtown last year, and if we had more time, I think this could have been brought in as part of that, but we opened up roughly 600 new units of housing downtown in the middle white section, which is not on this map, as you know, where downtown and High Street are. So we were sort of thinking if we're focusing on the core, it would be very helpful, particularly for the affordable housing numbers, to not have so much scattershot throughout the rest of town.
Can I ask a clarifying question?
Please.
And not to put you guys on the spot, but and not to pick on this particular project, but the Beaverbrook project, that would not be reflected on here, correct?
The subdivision?
The subdivision.
That's correct, yeah. So
Yeah.
that can and still will happen.
But the general, when David referenced the zoning updates last year, the general comment that was made a number of times was if you were to look at the zoning map and try to predict based on the rules what should happen where, these red spots represent things that were approved outside of the zoning bylaw as relief. And part of the concept with the zoning that was approved in 2017 and in 2020, and quite likely moving forward in some of the zoning districts that land use is evaluating, is to try to redirect growth to places where the infrastructure exists to accommodate it and away from places where there is no infrastructure to accommodate it. So we're not running new water, sewer, electric, and roads to get to these places, which becomes a long-term liability for us to maintain. And then I think with some of these red dots, until the town meeting decides that they want the residential districts to be zoned differently, this essentially strengthens the language in that regard, and again would redirect development where it can be more easily
So
absorbed.
are you suggesting there's no infrastructure on residence one?
I think it's two separate. So the part of it was with new subdivisions, it's having to extend infrastructure to places that are currently green. In these cases, it's more to do with mirroring the language in the zoning book to, and I don't want to misstate that because I know it's been discussed. And it sounds like the zoning board had thoughts that weren't necessarily in lockstep with what the proposed language is, but.
Yeah, the only other thing that I would add to that is the town does have existing multifamily residential zones, entire zones just dedicated to doing multifamily. We're happy to take a look at those. Those could always be expanded or better used. We were just thinking these are your single-family zoned districts, but yet they allow other types of uses that are not single-family.
Well, I might suggest you look at the whole picture before you start going into one focus. Where else can you do multifamilies? Where else do we want multifamilies or not? I think you're just looking at a small slice of the pie. I would be more comfortable if I had a fuller picture of what you're trying to accomplish town-wide.
But doesn't this address all residential zoning? All R zoning in this proposal? I'm not sure how more townwide.
It does address all R1, 2, and 3, which is all the single-family residential zoning, which is where these types of uses are currently allowed.
Well, aren't 2 and 3 mostly single-family?
The design of them is to be single-family. However, we do allow dwelling unit conversions and other multifamily development types in those zones. So a lot of people don't generally know that, but you could convert an older home into up to 4 units in R2 or R3, or do a multifamily project in those districts.
I mean, I would suggest some of the older homes throughout town, regardless of where they're located, are larger homes anyways, with room to convert to multi-units.
Yeah, there are a number of those.
I think,
Please, Aaron.
no, I think you're not wrong, and I think on paper, that's a reasonable exercise. I think in the last couple of weeks, staff has been trying to figure out exactly what we're looking at, and I think we were kind of surprised by the 800 number as being how many units we have over time allowed to be created in those single-family districts. And again, just trying to come up with a comprehensive, and we would totally agree, as David hinted at. Ideally, we would have had more time last year to tie in something like this so that there was more of a net neutral effect of bringing on the downtown zoning with something like this. But I think, again, we were just surprised by the number here that's been allowed to happen in the single-family districts.
Well, I grant you, nobody was happy with the multifamily on Pond Street and other things that have gone on in the past.
Right, and we've
but
heard a
still,
lot of that. And again, taken in isolation, they're not bad projects, and we're not here to chastise or poo-poo any of those developments. But I
Right.
think when we did this analysis, and I think R1 through 3 represents, I think, about 80% of the land area of the town, we were surprised that that number was that high. And the CBA has dealt with this a little bit over the last few years, and sometimes there was a level of discomfort to the point that they asked us to look into it and come up with a solution. Again, I'm not sure that this exact proposal, that they're all quite on board with it. But again, we wanted to bring it up with you. It's a policy discussion that we thought we should have with the Board of Selectmen and the Planning Board as we go through this fall, even if they don't all make it to town meeting.
So my thought process is we need to look at the big picture. You gentlemen and your staff have a better understanding of these concepts, but what are the ramifications? What is it we're trying to accomplish? Can we look at the bigger picture before we go to town meeting?
So I'm hearing ask for comprehensive planning money at town meeting.
How much do you need?
Couple $100,000, that's it.
No,
I think-
I'm not objecting to what you're doing. I just think, in my mind, what are we missing?
May I suggest I suspect that quite a few town meeting members would have questions about this as well. And I think that the exercise here, I'm gonna ask another unfair question. I would guess that most, if not all, of the units you've identified are not on the affordable housing list held by DHCD.
I can't say none of them are, but that's a good guess, yes.
But if these new housing units are spontaneously occurring in our existing districts, we would need to generate 80 units of affordable housing elsewhere on top of the growth patterns in those other districts just to tread water with respect to 40B. And I think that it is townwide, and the idea is to get the boards and town meeting to think about, to your point, Dan, the implications. So there are certainly, this offers homeowners and home buyers more predictable growth within their neighborhoods. It helps to protect us against 40B on a moving forward basis, but it certainly limits what people can do with their properties. If you have an older home that is on a large enough lot to convert, this would certainly limit that, and I think that's where the discussion and the trade-off occurs.
As a real estate professional, we don't like to limit homeowners' ability to develop their property within the guidelines of the town's permitting process.
Correct. Yeah. I agree with
And
you.
to amend that would require town meeting to say we reject that or we support that.
And we have to have a percentage of affordable housing. You still want to keep that, right, Aaron?
Yeah, and we'll
Okay.
touch on that.
Okay.
It's probably another discussion that
Yeah.
we'll get to, yeah.
Yeah.
All right, so I'm not
Mr.
comfortable.
Chairman?
Yeah, go ahead, Gardner.
No, it's a lot.
Could you explain how this, and I realize we're going to talk about the affordable housing provision next, but how this recommendation is affected by EFLAs? If I have a two-family but want to put an EFLA in for my mother-in-law, can I do this? Does it prohibit it? Does it stop it in any way?
This change would not affect that. Currently, you cannot do an EFLA with a two-family, but this does not affect EFLAs in any way, shape, or form. If you had a single-family house, you could do an EFLA all day long. It does not take into account anything to do with EFLAs. So EFLAs are still good to go, even if this went forward.
Okay, and I think what people are asking for, and I would want to see, is write down to the numbers how many people would be affected if this were to be put in place. How many people with sufficiently sized homes now would be affected?
I mean, I could answer by saying everybody that owns a lot in R1, 2, or 3 would be affected.
Any other comments from other members? Matt?
Yes. Just back to the 800 number. So I live in R1 and I see single-family homes that try to expand to 2 dwelling units on the lot and they can't do it by right. So would this kind of strengthen the restriction of allowing them to do that? In the sense that they could still do an EFLA, but they couldn't make it a they couldn't make the structure a two-family, but even by adding on to it.
Yeah, that's correct.
And the reason I ask is because it does have an impact on the neighborhoods. It creates much more density. Oftentimes, even though on paper it looks like there's sufficient off-street parking, in practice that's not the case. So you have more vehicles parked on the street. And it just, from a visual perspective, it just makes it seem more congested. So that's all I have, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. All right. If there's anything else, continue, David.
Okay. Nope. So the next thing was EFLAs. So some changes we're recommending to EFLAs. We're pretty much keeping all of the same rubric, the limit to 25 a year, who can live there. There's no change at all to it has to be a family member. We really just wanted to tackle how do you measure it. So right now in the bylaw, it's limited to 750 square feet, but it doesn't say what makes up that 750 square feet. You know, is it a habitable basement? Is it a habitable half story? Is it only the stuff on the first floor? What happens if it's 2 floors? And also, is it shared space? Is that included? Is it not? So it doesn't really talk about that. So we're trying to put something in there to say this is exactly how you measure it. I know the building commissioner's new, and between him and myself, we've had a lot of the same questions of, well, what are we counting when we get a floor plan? The other part of that is design considerations. So we did add a few changes there, mostly to exterior appearance, saying that if you had an exterior staircase or basement, it would need to be within the walls of the EFLA. It can't have an exposed stairwell on the outside. And then policy to regulation, and by that I mean things frequently asked for by the zoning board, but that may not be written down. So if we know that 95% of the time they're going to ask you, to share common space with the laundry room or the kitchen or the living room or whatever it may be, you might as well just put that in the book because you're likely not getting through unless you have that. So it doesn't ask for it today, but we just want to ask for those things going forward. That's pretty much it. There's not a lot going on with the changes.
Okay,
Okay.
I have a question.
sure, go ahead.
Just back to the common space. So today, it seems like you mentioned it's defined by whatever the applicant wants to say it is. And why EFLAs initially may be legitimate in their application, it's possible at a later date after a sale to another party that the EFLA suddenly becomes a part of a two-family. So I think that's the impetus, is to try to prevent that type of usage. And when you say common space, we know we talk about laundry room or even a common hallway, but that sometimes could be easily modified. Is there a way to kind of define it so it would be more difficult?
We left what they would like to define as common space open, only in that every building's different, every lot's different, and everybody's needs are different. So it'd be hard to say it has to be the kitchen or it has to be some specific room. We did leave that open. We did clarify whether or not the common space can be uninhabitable space. So is the garage, like right now, the garage technically could be common space. So you could have a unit here, a garage in between, and then the house over here. We just wanted to clarify that. It seems like it's something that the policy boards don't like to see. So once again, if you know that they're not going to like it, why don't we just codify that and let's get everybody on their way so we can get these EFLAs moving quicker.
Yeah, and with an EFLA on the other side of the garage, that's just like a two-family, really. So, and just one other thing about the view from the street. We're going to keep it where it looks like a single-family home, that the EFLA entrance into the EFLA is either through the side or through the rear.
Yep, we didn't change any of that.
Okay.
And like I said, most of the performance standards are still there. We kind of just added to them to clarify how do you call it an EFLA when it comes to the building department.
Okay, all right, that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. The next one up is we've kind of paired two concepts together. It's use variances and planned developments. So the main thrust of the article, to get to it in plain language, was we would propose to eliminate use variances in town and essentially replace them with what is called a planned development. That would be something that is ultimately voted on by town meeting, the planned development, but it will allow for a lot more forward planning of what projects would go forward, and then it also allows a developer, an applicant, or a team to propose multiple uses throughout multiple buildings on one parcel with some predictability. So it's very flexible, and it allows for a lot more potentially positive growth without the detractions of kind of an ad hoc development scheme. And I put this slide up here just to explain. I went through, I'm going to say, between 110 and 120 zoning ordinances and bylaws over the last week from different communities, and I could only find these few on the left-hand side that actually allow use variances. It's not in itself a bad thing. It's just kind of fallen out of favor in terms of a tool that's used by communities to permit types of development. So very few communities offer it. On the right-hand side, there were communities that do allow planned development typologies. This isn't all of them. It was just a quick summary of the ones that I have either known about or worked with in some fashion. So that's just to say that use variances of themselves are pretty rare. Planned developments are popular and gaining favor. We would suggest moving in that direction if there was to be a change.
Sorry, I was just going to chime in with one point. I'm sorry, because David's glossing over one important factor in use variances. state law actually prohibits use variances, but it did allow communities that had it in their zoning codes at the time, I believe it was 1975 amendment, that killed it statewide, but as we are one of the few communities that still allow them, we were allowed to carry that forward. So again, in theory, at the highest levels, the state doesn't really want you doing it, but it allowed certain communities to be grandfathered. The rule of thumb that we hear in the planning circle is about 10% of communities in the Commonwealth still allow them. But as David hinted at, that number is getting harder and harder to, it's probably well below that at this point, and these are the communities that we could find. So again, I just wanted to highlight that.
So you need a vote of town meeting to give up use variances.
Correct, but a community today could not do them anymore. You are not
I
allowed
understand,
to authorize.
but do we also, town meeting also vote to go to a planned development, or the one in the, they work hand in hand?
We're setting it up for them to work hand in hand. We didn't want to throw out the idea of eliminating a development permit that's allowable today without replacing it with some other typology. So we think that a better replacement and something that's certainly more modern going forward is a planned development. Like I said, an applicant would come forward and propose what they would like to do with any given site. So it does
So
make...
can you give us a little write-up of what a planned development looks like and how it goes through the process?
Yeah, I can certainly get that to you in writing, sure.
Yeah, just so we can take a look at it side by side.
Yeah, absolutely.
Mr. Chairman, I have a
Yes,
question.
please.
David, or Aaron, where does Middleton fall and Beverly, and I don't see them on this chart here.
They do not allow it.
They do not allow either one?
Middleton, I don't believe allows either one. Beverly, I don't think calls them planned developments, but they have,
They do.
as you know, several recent zoning changes that do allow for a lot more.
Yeah, I'm just looking at the surrounding areas, you know, in the footprint of Danvers,
Yeah.
where we fall our peers.
Yep. The communities that abut us, no one allows use variances, as far as I know.
What do they allow?
Right, yeah.
What do they do?
Uh,
Just hand them a permit?
I think probably planned development, maybe for Middleton a little.
Yeah, I mean, there's allowed uses, which in our zoning bylaw would just be a P, meaning by right. So you can go to the building inspector, pull a building permit, and get on with your day because it's allowed by zoning. There's things that are special permit, so it's only allowed through either a zoning board or a planning board or other type of permitting boards permit. But anything that occurs would occur through those two mechanisms or a planned development type scenario as opposed to a use variance.
Yeah, I'd like to see some information, if you could, David, like with our peers, how we compare to our peers, our surrounding peers. I mean, Fitchburg, Medford, Northampton, Plymouth, Sudbury, that's not, I want to see close to us, please.
Yeah, I guess with the left-hand column, I get what I'm trying to say is these are the only communities that I could find that allow that. So we're not going to find it anywhere near us. So just for what it's worth. Anyway, so going forward with the planned development, I can certainly get that right up to you, Mr. Chair, and the rest of the select board. But on this one, you know, a planned development for something like the Liberty Tree Mall could be very advantageous for us going forward in that it would allow several things to occur, phased out all at the same time, and with a lot more oversight, but future planning for what the community wants, the community as a whole. So just for what it's worth.
Okay.
Okay. Up next, last but not least, is inclusionary housing and civic space. The inclusionary housing changes really are attempting to codify our current multifamily affordability provision with what we passed for the downtown last year. Really, it's just lining those two up in an attempt to have one affordable provision townwide. So no matter where you're developing it, the rules are the same. Right now, we have two separate sets of rules. Additionally, we were asked to look at this by the Affordable Housing Trust because there are several development typologies that can come in without adding to the affordable housing rules. So it's really only triggered by a special permit from the planning board for multifamily. And we offer numerous types of other development that don't have to go through the affordable housing provision. So the Affordable Housing Trust wanted to capture those and just kind of get them in the system. And we do have a sliding scale, as I put up there. It's 10%, so basically treading water for smaller projects. For much larger projects, it would be 12.5% of affordable housing. don't have a heck of a lot more to say to that. I don't know if Mr. Trask wants to comment at all.
Gardner?
Well, thank you. So the Affordable Housing Trust has been in place for close to 10 years now, and we've been very successful working with the Planning Board and the Zoning Board of Appeals. The current inclusionary zoning, as you said, is only comes into play under special permit conditions. And what we're trying to do is, and when the downtown overlay district was built, the Affordable Housing Trust was consulted, and we tried to make it as similar as possible. This actually makes it the same rules no matter where you are, and it doesn't limit it to special permitting, because we've had a lot of developments and subdivisions that have not had to participate in affordable housing requirements. Though, as I said, the Planning Board and the Zoning Board of Appeals have gotten really good about, even though an applicant may not fall within the current inclusionary zoning language, they do send them to the Affordable Housing Trust for discussion. So this just codifies what we've been doing and makes it consistent across the board.
Thank you.
All right. Unless there's any questions on that, the last item of the evening was civic space, and I'll turn it over to my colleague, friend, and boss for that.
Thank you, David. So this one, we started talking about last year. And I guess I will kind of give you the caveat that when you look at your zoning map, any community's zoning map, what you're really looking at is some point in the future, your idealized build-out map. And when we look at Danvers' zoning map, what you will see is that there's not a single square foot of property in this community zoned for a place to put a school, a place to put a park. Any number of institutional uses that contribute to the character of the community aren't there. We want it, if it's not commercial, it's got a single family home on it. That's what this map says. Yet we own and control and participate in organizations that contribute mightily. And I don't think we want those properties to necessarily up and go away or up and sell. And again, this is a little bit of a scary scenario, but when I was the town planner in Milton, Massachusetts, back around 2003, 2004, the Archdiocese of Boston closed 3 churches in the community of Milton, and all 3 of them went to market, and there was a lot of consternation within the community because they were zoned for single family, and the community was under the 40B thresholds, and that started a chain of events that the community frankly couldn't control. Situation's very different here in Danvers, but nonetheless, I think a lot of these types of properties, people think, oh, that would never happen. But it does happen. I was in the town of Lexington for 10 years. There was a golf course that started selling off parts of the golf course that it determined it no longer needed. So again, there are uses that we think of as quite permanent, but they're not. Everything has a price associated with it. And I think the gist of this proposal is to really recognize the importance that these parcels play in town. And to try to play a little bit of defense and recognize that and ensure that if those properties are to evolve in the future, which they should do and probably will do, that town meeting has a role in that process. Also, secondarily, as we were going through this process of identifying these parcels and mapping them and bringing the pretty picture that I hope to show you in 2 slides back up, we also started running into issues with the existing boundaries of current zoning districts and some spatial data issues associated with that. So a secondary task that we've been working on over the last year since we last had this conversation publicly has been to try to make some of those corrections. And there are some issues that we will identify and probably not get into in great depth tonight, but there are some weird vestiges that occur when you actually really zoom in on this map and look at. And I do apologize because it doesn't translate very well. These colors are getting a little washed out, so I apologize. We did provide you a hard copy, a PDF copy that you can really zoom in on and see a little bit better. Obviously, we have hard copies upstairs available for the public, and we're happy to share the digital versions with whomever if you really want to zoom in on these maps. But basically, this concept is to try to recognize those parcels, identify them in a new zoning district called the Civic Space Zoning District. There'd be 3 subparts to that: institutional, open space, and utilities and rights of way. And then commensurate with that, correct many of the zoning district boundary lines that you get left with when you have that image in sharp view. It's hard to see, and I won't zoom in, but there's some weird edges in some of the around Woodvale, and there's some funky vestiges around that when you actually start to try to eliminate split zoning districts, for instance, like you have parcels running, the zoning line runs 125 feet off a street. So you have a single family home in front, but the back 50 feet are in COM 3. So we tried to correct that and basically throw the parcels all in one district or another. But as we go through this conversation with the planning board and coming back to the board and with the finance committee, we hope to zoom in on that and get some comments and try to figure out what makes sense. So it's a big concept, and I'm not doing it justice by talking quickly and trying to get through it in 3 minutes, but I'm happy to take any comments on it.
Anybody? No, we look forward to zooming in the future.
Great. And there, again, we will, if you have time to take a look at the map, we would really appreciate the comments.
Did you send us the PDF?
Yes. Yep, it was in that folder, the shared folder in, I think it was item I from the November 2020 town meeting. When you went into that folder, there was one articles from last year, articles from this year. This is in that articles from last year.
You're talking about a link that was within the digital memo that was sent out?
Yes.
Yeah. So the PDF was sent, the hard copy you received tonight, I think on page...
It says click here. It
Yeah.
says click
If
here.
you look
Yeah.
at page 2, it says click here.
Yeah.
On the PDF version.
It's hard to click on the paper
Yeah.
copy.
Yeah, you
but-
can click all night on this
Right.
one, but if you click on the digital version, it'll take you
Correct.
to the
Correct.
website where a red
Yeah.
line version of every document we talked about
Yeah.
tonight is contained. And I would just say, if it's not already, if that folder is forward-facing somewhere on the planning website so that members of the public can find it.
If it's not, we'll do that. But again,
Perfect, yep.
we have, basically, we gave you a link to all of this information with the red line versions of all of the proposals that were discussed tonight, including the existing and the proposed zoning map, just so you can zoom in and see this in more depth.
So, do you have an extra copy of that?
I can get you one. Like, you would like a hard copy? I knew you would.
You
I
have to
warned-
understand, I have glaucoma, and I have a field of vision, I can't read a computer.
Yep.
It's blank.
Happy
And
to
I hate to
make-
publicize that, but I can't click and see anything.
Yep. No,
Aaron-
we can absolutely get you hard copies.
Thank you.
Can you scoot back to the timeline? And while he's doing that, I would say if other members of the board would like hard copies, we can produce those. We didn't print them ahead of time because they are very lengthy, and some people prefer to look at them on a computer. But we have hard
Yep.
copies upstairs for anybody who wants to come in and see them. We can also print them. And Aaron, I don't know if I could try, but you probably do a better job of sort of explaining the purpose for tonight's discussion and how that fits in with the process moving forward.
Yep. So as David said at the beginning, we're trying to track Mass General Law, Chapter 40A, Section 5, which governs how we do zoning changes for towns. And we're trying to do a little bit better job of tracking that so that our public hearing with the planning board is concluded and we've received all substantive comments from the select board, the finance committee, and yourselves at that time, because in theory, after that, it gets a little harder, and we would like to avoid any amendments on the floor of town meeting. So this plan to open the public hearings with the planning board on the 14th and not close them till October 12th is so that we can get all of that feedback in as much depth. Again, and we did send out that email last week to all of the boards, including the town moderator, town council. We are happy to meet with whomever, whenever, wherever is needed. If you want to hone in on this article and forget the other ones, we're happy to do that. And that really goes to all members of any of the related boards, town meeting members. We are happy to get down and dirty with everyone on these so that by October 12th, we have basically completed and finalized articles. So as we go return to you on October 19th and to the FinCom shortly thereafter, these articles are done and everyone will know the positions, and there won't need further modifications. So we got a lot of work ahead of us in the next couple of weeks.
So if I could chime in for a second. So the goal and the chair of the Finance Committee indicated that the Finance Committee would be available sometime during the first week in October to have a similar discussion, a very high-level overview, so that Aaron and David could hear from the Select Board and the Finance Committee, at least preliminarily, kind of where their concerns were, so that as they work with the Planning Board through the public hearing process and come back to this board on the 19th, they'll have had some preliminary feedback from all of the parties, except for town meeting, although we have some town meeting members here tonight, who will be expected to weigh in on this when we get into November. So there will be a formal presentation on the 19th back before this board for iterations of what we've already seen tonight.
Yeah.
And then I think just before we forget, there's a request that the board consider, there's no need to wait. We would, looking at a November 15th special town meeting, we would be asking that the board vote to close the warrant on Tuesday, which is Tuesday the 19th of October, which is a little bit less than a month away from the town meeting. That gives anybody who's interested in adding items to this town meeting warrant, a month plus a week from today to work on that. But it also gives staff and town council a little less than a month to work through any issues that come up as a part of that, to be prepared for the town meeting in November.
Okay, understood. Anything else?
Not unless you have anything else for us.
Board members? David?
I'd just like to say, I've been doing zoning stuff for 50 years, and I think that the substance that has been prepared by the planning department is extremely competent, and the presentation of that substance, which is equally important, is very, very well done. So I commend this. This is really, really a great planning department and great people working at it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Ditto.
I have something.
Yes, Matt?
Yeah, so just back to the material itself that's been discussed. So over the past several years, you've done a great job with posting a lot of documentation related to the character-based zoning districts online. That way people that are watching can kind of just click on it. They don't have to request the documents or whatever. People would rather have it in electronic format. So if you could maybe find a container and then put this material in there, that'd be great.
Yep, we do plan to do that. Tonight's like the official kickoff, so this week we'll have that up.
Okay, great. Thank you.
I just want to say, David and Aaron, great material, lots of work, and a lot of work, and it's good, like Matt said, we want people to know where to find the material, so we don't have questions, so we can go, go by these dates. Thank you.
Sure.
Gardner, any comments? You're muted.
Sorry, I'm sorry, no, I have no comments.
All
Thank
right,
you very
good.
much.
Just want to give the opportunity. Thank you. So, David, Aaron, thank you for coming and explaining it to the best of your ability, which is very good. Sometimes we're a little slow on understanding, but you're giving us 2 months to digest it.
Yep, there's a lot of time.
Yep, great. Thank you very much for coming tonight and spending your evening with us.
Oh, no problem. Thank you.
You're welcome. So, board members, if you don't object, I'm going to take a 5-minute recess. Order. Thank you, Danvers. We'll resume our agenda, and we're on item number 7. The board will discuss the status of the train station on property owned by Townsend Oil. Mr. Town Manager?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This agenda item was added at the last meeting after a brief discussion, I believe on your behalf, as the chair of the Preservation Commission. Just briefly, I'll explain some materials that were sent out with the packets. You have a very comprehensive memorandum from Ann Freitas in my office detailing some of the history on this building going back to 1988. And there were 3 documents included with that chronology. The first is a historical explanation of the significance of this station, provided, I believe, by Town Archivist Dick Tress through Select Board Member Bennett. The second packet of information is the votes and language. I'm sorry. There's a copy of the current demolition bylaw from the general bylaw for the board to review, and with that should be. I'm just checking now. What's not in my packet, which may or may not be in yours, was language from the 2016 town meeting vote, which after a public hearing process, town meeting voted to support the relocation of this station to the Hobart Street parking lot, subject to the ability to obtain a $750,000 earmark from the state. That earmark ultimately did not come through. And then the last document that was in your packets was a very rough budget estimate that was prepared at the time of the 2016 town meeting, describing the costs associated with relocating and placing the station and pulling utilities to it, but leaving the inside essentially unfinished for a future tenant. So the Preservation Commission did meet in July as an application was made by the property owner where the train station currently sits. And the Preservation Commission, consistent with their past votes, did once again deem the station historically significant to allow for time to figure out whether there was a buyer or a person or party or organization interested in taking possession of the station, which brings us to the discussion tonight.
Thank you, Steve. As chairman of the Preservation Commission, I did ask the board to consider putting this on tonight's agenda, and they agreed to do so. And as Steve mentioned, back on July 30th, 2021, the Danvers Preservation Commission determined that the 1968 Danvers Plains train station is worthy of presentation based on the distinctive architectural characteristics of the structure and its long association with Danvers' cultural and social history. Back in August 1981, the Massachusetts Historical Commission confirmed the historical significance of the structure for architectural, commerce, community development, and transportation themes. Since that time, there have been numerous attempts to move the station to an appropriate location. As Steve mentioned, you received a recap of these efforts in your packet. There, for the sake of time, I will not dwell on those failed efforts. However, after looking at various sites, the prevailing consensus is the Hobart Street lot affords good visibility and will make the station a signature property for the community, and it is directly on the rail trail path. The use of the building can be determined at a future date as long as it positively adds to the fabric of the community and preserves the original features. Note, per Richard Trask, there are 279 surviving railroad structures in Massachusetts. While none are used for rail or transit, they have been repurposed with 34 residential uses, 8 private, 12 are vacant, 15 are museums, 17 are community and/or municipal uses, and 158 are commercial uses. To have this last opportunity to preserve the 1868 train station and ignore it would be a huge historical mistake. I am suggesting No, I am asking this board to request funding from town meeting to move and preserve a significant Danvers building. In your packet, you received an estimated project budget to relocate and preserve the station dated 2016 for $741,000. To arrive at a number for 2022, I used as a guide the Turner Building Cost Index for non-residential buildings, showing increases of starting in 2016 of 4.8%, 5%, 5.6%, 5.5%, 1.8%, and 3.2% in this 21, to arrive at an estimate to request borrowing up to $1.2 million. Many town projects are supported by the use of public money. Some examples, but not limited to, are Bell's Grove, Miriam Cooper Peach Orchard, the local beach, many soccer and ball fields. Why not save our history in a significant building that had an impact on Danvers history? Town meeting approval will give time to fundraise using opportunities such as GoFundMe, Essex Heritage, Massachusetts Historical Society, and with the Massachusetts Bay Railroad enthusiasts. I hope this board agrees to ask town meeting to support the efforts to save the station. To not ask would be a failure in itself. And I'd be happy to try to answer any questions, and I do have copies for the board members of the Turner Building Cost Index that I used. Gardner, did I send that to you? I believe I did. So board members, what I'm asking is for direction to the town manager to prepare a warrant article for the special town meeting to save a significant historic building. And I'd be happy to answer any questions or take any comments. Matt,
I can
please.
speak. So it's kind of disconcerting that we still wrestle with this after all these years about saving the station. I think it's appropriate to ask town meeting to sort of, in essence, provide a loan to perform this move. I think with the understanding that at some point the town would be repaid either through grants, donations, and then ultimately, I think from rent or something, some type of income in that we would allow a private entity such as an architectural firm or a law firm to use it as an office space that wouldn't require a large number of parking spots. So I think if you think back what previous generations have done for the town in terms of saving, open space such as Endicott Park, it's sort of paying it forward. It doesn't seem unreasonable to ask town meeting for this money. It's not a gift. I think that as a loan, I think it would be more acceptable. And it's up, I think you mentioned up to $1 million, but if we did this in phases, the initial move and then the preparation of a foundation, I think would be, according to your numbers, less than 200,000. So I think if we look at it in phases, it becomes more palatable. But
Thank you, Matt, but I think we want to be transparent with town meeting and let them know what the project costs are estimated to be. And as in the past, we've had bonding issued for open space, but didn't spend it all until it was needed. So I think we want to get that bonding in place. And yes, the intent is to pay back as much as we can. We borrow for 20 years, and over a period of time, we're raising money, getting grants. Once we move it, there'll be a lot more enthusiasm to support it and build it out, without a doubt. And we'll develop a fund, and any funds that go into it will be used to pay off the bonding, the borrowing, I think is how I envision this. We'll get to you in a second, Bill, thank you. I want the fellow board members to make their comments and questions, but I see your hand up. So, Maureen, any comments?
No, Dan, Mr. Chairman, I agree with Matt totally. I think with the loan, put it on the, for town meeting. Maybe, like we talked about fundraising, grants. I mean, it did say state funding. We got to see where we're at with the state, but I would be okay with putting that on.
Right. And
as a
Mr.
loan,
Archer
too.
was going to be here tonight, he's not here, and he can lend his experience. He raised funds for the Williams School to get that up and running over the years, so some experience from him.
And volunteers.
And volunteers,
from the
yep,
public on raising
exactly.
funds would be
Yep.
great.
GoFundMe.
Yep. So I agree.
All right, thank you. David, comments?
It would be a beautiful thing to have this station on Hobart Street or somewhere so it could be pretty and beautiful. But I struggle, and I have struggled in the last couple of years, with public funds being used to do this historical hobby, which is a wonderful idea. And I have been pleading with the proponents through the years to call Warren Buffett or Bloomberg News or some of these rich people in the world to get funding to do this and not ask the ordinary Danvers taxpayer who's going to look at me, the people in my age group, and say, what are you doing with my money? And it's a beautiful thing, but I drive by it every day. I have driven by it every day for the last 7 or 8 years. It's not going to be moved. It'll have to be dismantled with the hope of saving whatever timbers can be, and then to be carefully put back together like a model. It's not going to be done for, well, I would start to ask the town meeting, the concept of a loan to who? Where is the business plan? There is no business plan for this. And I think I can't support it unless there were a business plan that showed it was not going to be done at public expense. It was not going to be maintained then at public expense. And I would support all the best efforts to get it done, but not at public expense. Thank you.
Thank you. Gardner?
Thank you. So I have similar feelings to David's. First of all, there's no doubt in anybody's mind that this would be a wonderful thing if we could preserve it, keep it, restore it, revitalize it, reuse it. But there is a reality that this has been going on for over 20 years. And I realize you didn't want to go into each of the nitty-gritties of the past efforts, but a lot of well-intentioned, well-meaning, positioned people have made a lot of efforts to try to save this train station time and time and time again. I realize Mr. Archer did raise some money for the school, but he didn't have to buy the Williams School. It was a refurb and refurbish. Mr. Archer does fantastic work, but he's had 2 other efforts at the same train station. There were plans to put it across from Town Hall. Before, there were plans to put it at Hobart Street. I fought this fight. I fought this fight on behalf of the selectmen in 2016. And then it was that we were facing the specter of people who didn't want it on Hobart Street, the people who actually helped promote the parking lot, because if Bill Cock was here, he'd tell you that he and I fought hard for that. Yes, it was a collaboration with businesses. Yes, they have some, they have a seat at the table in discussing its use. I was willing to fight that fight when we had state funding lined up. And I'm losing internet stability, but if I lose you, I'm sorry. But I was willing to fight that fight when we had state funding set up. If the town meeting would not have passed if the warrant article, if the funding was not in place. The catalyst for passing that was that we were getting state funding. If that wasn't going to happen, I don't believe it would have passed in 2016. The estimate you have, $1.2 million, I don't want to do this piecemeal. I want to know the cost, rehabilitation of that, because your $1.2 million is specific only to moving and securing the building. We have a history of keeping buildings, and those buildings cost money every single year. Right across from Town Hall is the old senior center, which is now being used by the food pantry, which requires operating upgrades. And the money we're getting from the state is designed to help us catch up on some of our past operating issues that we've foregone and set aside and kicked the can down the road. I don't want to use the money that we're getting now to kick all of those other projects down the road for the sake of this project. So I'd like to know, like David Mills said, what's the business plan? Who's going to go in there? How is it going to be self-sustaining? Once all of the work to move it and all the work to restore it is done, there's still annual operating costs. Who's going to pay those costs? What are we going to put in there? If we decide that it is going to be a museum, fantastic, but let's make that decision and say to the Danvers taxpayers where the money is coming from and how it will sustain itself. We have a whole village of buildings that were moved up on the edge of Route 1 of historic buildings in town, which are just sitting up there and not used other than for business purposes right now. I'm afraid I see that this is listed as a citizen's petition in our documents. I'm not sure that it's a citizen's petition. I think you're asking for a selectman's warrant
I don't know where you
article.
saw that.
In our packet, we got a list of potential warrant articles, and there were several citizens petition. In our packet, we got a list of several warrant articles, and this one was listed as a citizens petition.
That was the special town meeting, the town meeting back a couple of years ago. It has nothing to
Okay,
do with
all
this
right.
request. That's
Thank you.
that's
Thank you.
information the town manager sent along.
All right, but nonetheless, you're asking for the selectmen as a selectman's warrant article, and until I have understanding, clarity on the funding, going out and trying to get fundraising now to backfill the cost, I think is inappropriate. We've gone to all of the sources you've recommended. We've gone to the National Heritage sites. We've gone to the railroad enthusiast sites. We've gone for Fund Me opportunities. I remember the Grahams were selling T-shirts in support of this. Postcards. I remember Danvers Family Festival helped support it by trying to sell postcards where the donations went. $1.2 million just to move and just to secure the building seems, is part of the cost. And I'm afraid I can't go into it with only part of the cost. I don't want to buy a pig in a poke. I don't want to get married to this project if when we come back, the restoration is so much more. David Mills suggested disassembling it and reassembling it, and I've spoken to Richard Trask about it. He doesn't want that. That's not restoration. That's not preserving the train station as it was meant to be preserved and moved. It has to be moved en masse. It has to be preserved on the outside to prevent further damage, and then restoration has to happen.
And that's what I'm proposing.
I get it, but you're only proposing the amount of money that will get it moved and secured. You aren't proposing the money that will get it restored, and we don't have any income source to make it sustainable after that. Those are my concerns.
Thank you. Somebody in the audience, Bill Bradstreet, comments?
May I make while he's walking up, I've heard reference a couple times to a loan. I just want to make clear, if the board decides to prepare this as a warrant article, we have to identify the funding source. We can't reference a loan that would be paid back through.
It's really not a loan, it gives us the opportunity.
We can reference fundraising, but we would need to be specific that this would be debt service.
Yes.
Backed by the tax levy.
That's correct.
Right.
Bill?
Bill Bradstreet, town meeting member, Precinct 1. What I was thinking, the same as Mr. Mills was, at the very least, houses, buildings are taken apart, stored, find a proper location, reassemble it, perhaps even better than it was, but at the very least, save it. Save it in pieces if you have to, until you can afford or find a proper location. I don't really know or care how much it costs. If the important part is saving it, that's one way to save it. My comment, same as Mr. Mills and has been mentioned. There's more than one way to take care of this. That's one option. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments from the audience? Hearing none. What's the will of the board?
I'll make a motion to create a warrant article for the special town meeting that would request $1.1 million,
Up to 1.2.
up to $1.2 million to be directed to move the train station to the Hobart Street lot.
Is there a second?
So can I just ask a question?
Yeah.
So when we're creating a warrant, that means town meeting's going to vote on it?
We're asking town meeting to approve the warrant that Steve will prepare for this board to discuss at a public.
But we're talking about, like, Matt and I want to do, like, maybe loan or something like that.
It's not a loan.
It's not
We have to,
fundraising?
we borrow the money, we bond it, the town's responsible. Any fundraising efforts will go to a fund to pay off, however the manager wants to use it to pay off the debt.
We've done that in the past. We have to, like, in 2016, town meeting was asked specifically to accept the train station and move it, and the funding source was identified as a state grant, which we had, the governor had agreed to put that into an earmark. In this case, we have to be able to point to a funding source, so a generic loan wouldn't pass legal review. We'd have to say this would be added to our debt service.
For the town?
We could say that there's a hope of offsetting it with fundraising or grants, et cetera, but town meeting has to understand that they're committing to the full cost if those things don't happen.
So we can't say we can commit to it as long as it's grants?
Correct. That would be an empty vote, because then it would essentially tie up the building until we pursued grants, and to the point that was made, we've tried unsuccessfully many times to secure grants for this. There aren't that many grants out there for preservation, which is one of the issues that the preservation group runs into
So
consistently.
then it could go to the taxpayers or for the town to pay for the 1.2 million?
That's what the town meeting would be asked.
Okay. I'm not going to vote for that, Dan.
No second?
No.
There's no second. I mean, I can second it for conversation, but I can count to 3. Thank you, Matt, for your support.
Mr. Chairman, I want people to understand, it's not that we don't support the preservation of this, and obviously, I'm as close as anybody to the people who want to preserve this, as far as the town archivist. I think it's a case of, if we're going to make a case, we make a case that includes all the costs, all the charges, and how we proceed to raise the money to do that. And I think that after 20 years, we actually owe a debt of gratitude to the towns and people for keeping it this long, and allowing the town many bites at this apple. And I'm not sure I see any clearer solution today than I did in 2016, or prior to that, when plans were trying to, I can't remember exactly, I think it was around 2012, when they were trying to put it across from Town Hall. If I saw a clearer light at the end of the tunnel, I would offer that. If this goes forward, like all warrant articles, it will go forward and, go on to town meeting for their vote. I just have concerns. That's all.
Okay. So there was no motion that was seconded, so that the conversation is over. So, Town Manager?
Thank you, Chairman. 2 brief items for you this evening. First, just looking ahead, There's an executive session that was noted on the cover letter for the memorandum for the new members. Each year, the select board meets in executive session to discuss the performance of the management team, and then there's an agenda item on the agenda for that night. There's an item on the agenda for that night to vote to pass the management compensation plan, which is a merit-based pay system that has been in place in Danvers since 1979 when town meeting adopted it. So you'll be getting some materials ahead of that meeting. We'll have a brief executive session, and then there will be a public discussion and a vote as part of that. I'll also be sending out, as part of that agenda packet, some draft strategic objectives for the board to consider. So if you want to reference the 5 goals that we adopted for the current year, which included moving forward on the water permit, boy, I'm blanking on them now. It's been a whirlwind of a year. I didn't bring my document with me. In any case, there were 5 very good strategic objectives we've been working very hard on, so hard that my brain is addled this evening. But if you'd like me to send out a copy of that tomorrow so you can reference that, and then if you have items you'd like to add to that list, typically we'll discuss it at a meeting, winnow it down, and then we'll set them at a subsequent meeting. These are objectives that get put in place above and beyond everything else that's going on. These are the areas that this board, so the Public Works facility, for example, is one of those this year. And so that'll be at the next meeting. And then just briefly, the North Shore Chamber of Commerce is having its annual State of the Region breakfast at the Hilton Hotel on September 15th. That's a morning event. I and the mayors and managers from the region will be speaking to the chamber as we do each year. And if anybody's interested in attending that, simply send an email to Ann Freitas in my office, and we can help get you signed up for that. That's all that I have.
Okay. The board will consider the consent calendar. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second?
David, in favor?
Yes.
Matt?
Yes.
Maureen?
Yes.
Gardner?
Yes.
And yes. Okay, correspondence, select board, new business, previous new public business, update, select board closing comments. Gardner?
Thank you. First of all, I want to congratulate the fire professionals and police professionals who were recently installed in their new roles in the past 2 Thursdays. Congratulations to them. I think it speaks well to the town of Danvers to have such dedicated professionals, and I'm very pleased for everybody who was installed in their new positions. Other than that, I've gotten the same correspondence everybody else has, and I don't think I have any other specific business to bring up at this time. Thank you.
Thank you. Maureen?
Okay, Dan, I just want to say that I do like to preserve, historic things in Danvers, but I just can't see the taxpayers paying any more money.
The conversation is
Yeah.
moot. I
No, I
appreciate
know,
your
but I
comments.
just wanted to say it, and if there's any other way that we can try to do it through fundraising or anything, I'll be more
It's
than
the
happy.
ninth
help.
hour.
Yeah,
There's no other options, there's no other spurs to go down. This was the last option
yeah.
to save that train depot.
So I wanted to try, but I didn't want it to cost any more money, especially when money's so important right now. Anyways, for the committees that I'm on, the rail trail, the new rail trail, Salisbury, Newburyport, is doing great on progress. I'll let Matt elaborate on that when it gets to him. He's very involved with that too. They have a great group. All I can say is a lot of volunteers, Paul and Charlie and Tommy and everybody. Thank you for the good work. Safety on the rail trail is very important at all times because kids and animals are there. We had our meeting, last week and a half ago about horses. There was somebody riding a horse down the trail. Horses are prohibited from the trail, okay, for safety. And, let's please try to help anybody. They're always looking for volunteers. So anybody that wants to volunteer, and they also have fundraising there with Larry Prawl. And Mark Jones is very good at, if you need anything, any information on the rail trail, get a hold of Mark Jones. And then also, please pick up pet droppings. Let's be responsible. And then the other thing is the Robert Lynch race event on 10/10 at 10 a.m. If you have any interest in running, walking, biking, contact Jillian and Jessica Lynch. And for the Danvers Housing Authority, Cindy Dunn's reporting that the majority of our seniors are vaccinated. They are wearing the mask. She has ordered some outdoor seating for people, so they can get out in the community rooms where they sit. It's limited with mask again, so but Cindy and her team do a great job. And other than that, thank you, Danvers.
Thank you. David?
Thank you, Dan. The Human Rights and Inclusion Committee will have its regular monthly meeting Thursday this week at the police station at 7 o'clock. And that committee has taken off like a rocket ship. Lots of enthusiasm, lots of action this year. And so they're in the process now of planning activities for the coming year, and it's really a great enthusiasm. I do note that Eileen Page had been the staff liaison to that committee for the last couple of years. And I guess she's leaving, she's leaving that assignment anyway. And I must say, wow, what a wonderful support she has been. And I thank her for her service. The cable television, the Cable Advisory Committee, or whatever we're called, is going to be asking for time from the chairman at the next selectmen's meeting, because they have exciting news to present with respect to the current contract negotiations. And then, what did I want to mention? The Unity in the Community poster, which is still over here, I don't know if it can be. They're available in the planning office, and there are not a lot of them up in town, but the Inclusion Committee likes to ask people to put them up on their lawns or their storefronts as a continuing effort to show that Danvers is a welcoming and inclusive community, and will continue to work for that. There was something else, and I can't remember. Sorry. Thank you.
Thank you. Matt?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just several items. So first, Maple Square project, that's the former Hot Lot property. There's currently activity in front of the Zoning Board of Appeals by the applicant. I'd like to see more increased public participation in these hearings, specifically with town meeting members. The last turnout was primarily folks from the Maple Street Church. There were some town meeting members there that did offer some input, but the plan that's going to be submitted really doesn't meet, I think, the ideals of what town meeting approved back in December of 2017 when they approved the character-based zoning district for that Industrial One property. So it's important that people make their views known now, because at some point it'll be a done deal, and then it'll just change the character of that section of the downtown area. Will just change it forever, and not really in a positive way from my perspective. The next item has to do with e-bikes, electric bikes. My fellow board member Bernard mentioned safety on the trail. Safety is always paramount. Currently, the trail is defined as for non-motorized vehicles only. But I'm seeing more and more e-bikes every day, and some of them are class 3, which have speeds of up to close to 30 miles an hour. And it's causing a dangerous environment on the trail. If you're a regular user of the trail, you know that there are many bicyclists who don't make themselves, they don't announce themselves as they come up behind you. And so I've spoke to folks that are involved with the Coastal Trails Coalition up in the Newburyport area. And because they accepted federal money for their trail, E-bikes are not allowed there, although they do appear occasionally. The next item, it has to do with the Hurricane Ida, the remnants of that storm that came through recently. We really, the North Shore dodged a bullet. The storm could have easily shifted to the east by 100 or 200 miles, and we would have been the recipients of the huge volumes of rainwater. I think because the North Shore really hasn't experienced a significant hurricane event in many decades, we may have become complacent. I think the town should maybe have some type of skull session to discuss how they would handle a devastating storm of that respect. For example, we have these brooks that come through town: Beaver Brook, Crane Brook, Frostfish Brook through Woodvale. You can imagine they're babbling brooks today, but they could become raging rivers. And so we need to be prepared for that type of storm. Lastly, well, there's a Trails and Sales series of events that are scheduled. This is the 20th year, Essex National Heritage Area. There's 100 plus free events throughout Essex County. There's a guide that's available on trailsandsales.org or through the essexheritage.org websites. And these events take place starting on Friday, September 17th, and they go until Sunday, September 26th. And many of these are kid-friendly. And then just lastly, for our Jewish friends, we're in the middle of Rosh Hashanah, and that's the Jewish New Year. So to them, Shana Tova. And that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you, Matt. Danvers Cares will meet next Monday morning at 9 o'clock after a summer hiatus. I think we'll have a new director because the latest director got promoted to, in the school system, I think, to a position of, I'm trying to think what, guidance council, I believe it is. So kudos to her. And I have no other reports, so if you see a veteran, please thank the veterans for their service. And there's nothing else to come before this board. Meeting adjourned. Good night.